an evaluation of the autism program in Illinois. What were some of the findings since the inception of the program?
Well, there were two major things that I noticed. One was that the overwhelming amount of direct services that were given, the increase in direct services before TAP started to this current day was just stunning across the board. You know, when you look at percent change, they weren't in the hundreds, they were in the thousands and 10,000s of percent change. So just an enormous number of children were getting access directly and indirectly through the direct services you were providing. And I know initially TAP was really looking at a network of services and trying to get a systems network going. And one of the things I found was that in hindsight, I think if the direct services hadn't been there, the network would have been harder to get. And I talked a lot with Georgia Winston and some other people giving us some of this feedback that I think the network has really done an amazing job of expanding. But, you know, a lot of people, when you start, they want direct services. How are you going to help my child tomorrow? What can I do? Where can I get my son evaluated or my daughter into school? And I think the fact that TAP strategically kind of worked toward that initially, the direct services, and saying, hey, we have some money, we want to help you, what are you doing? And let people kind of focus on what their strengths were out across the state. And then you start slowly working the network into it. And I think that strategy is a strategy I think a lot of places around the country should try to replicate if they're going to attempt something like this. I think if you'd come in real strong saying, here's a network, we have to do these things, people would have resisted because, you know, kind of on the front lines where so many of your people are, you're facing people who are saying, help my child, help me as a family. Here's school saying, help us as a school. So I think that in talking to Georgia, it wasn't 100% sure that was the initial plan, but I think the fact that people went in very well intended with an intent to help children with special needs, and specifically with autism in this state, this is kind of how this has flourished.
Why do you think a network or a system of care is so important?
Well, I think, you know, when you take a family that first learns that they have a child with autism or some kind of special needs, and they, once they kind of recover from the shock of that many times, they have to think very differently for the rest of their life and the life of their child. Because often we traditionally think that our children, not that people think this initially, but we think children are going to help take care of us as we get older. Well, this is just a different world for children with special needs. And I've talked to so many parents who have thought, I'm not only trying to think what to do with my child who's 4, 5, and 6, but what happens when we die. And that's a very different thought for parents. So I think the fact that you have direct services in this network is going to be very comforting to a lot of parents who have to think not just their own generation, but beyond their generation to help. And I know a lot of the programs that you have through TAP are not looking just kind of, you know, 3 years through 21 years, but looking as adults and how to help adult children with special needs and autism. So I think that's one of the huge aspects that is going to really help parents be very happy with things in the state of Illinois.
What are some services, we're talking about lifespan services, what are some of those lifespan services that are going to become very important in the years as these children who are now being diagnosed mature?
I think a lot of it's going to, it depends on the severity of the disorder. But you're going to have to look at kind of home health care type of programs, or some of these people, where they're going to live. I think that's a major stressor for parents. You see a lot of parents whose children, once they get out of high school, which can be legally at the age of 21, they're back in their home. What do I do with them? How do I have some kind of assisted living arrangements for individuals? How do we find jobs for individuals that work through? So I think those are the things that, as people become older, with this kind of exploding disorder, you know, of just sheer numbers, that's going to be the biggest issue. And on the milder end, how can I provide for my child to live the best, to their best potential, what that is, and how can I help my child meet their dreams, because they have dreams like everybody else. And so